And a very pleasant good morning, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Morning Briefing. I'm Jeff DeForest, along with one Mike Lubitz, and happy to have you with us for what we hope is going to be a very profitable session here on the show, as we're going to take a look at the Sunday games in the National Football League's Divisional Playoff round. Now, we gave you a couple of suggestions on the games that are taking place on Saturday. Both those games with hideous-looking numbers attached to them. The Ravens favored by 9.5 in their ball game, and then, of course, the other game involving the San Francisco 49ers. The Ravens taking on the Houston Texans. Kind of an upstart team with a good story behind them, but we're assuming that is going to come to an abrupt end. The Houston Texans fairy tale story with C.J. Stroud, still very, very good and positive season for them, but it's time they wave guy bye-bye, and we moved on to the real contenders here, pretenders and contenders. And then in the other Saturday game, talking about the NFC, you have the Green Bay Packers going on the road. A lot of people like the Packers in that game, Lubie. I think you came to the conclusion that the Packers were the team to be reckoned with in terms of getting 9.5 points against the San Francisco 49ers. You are waiting for a complete embarrassing blow-up on the part of one Brock Purdy.
I like Brock Purdy. If there's a quarterback in the matchups that could fall apart, like we saw him do it. I mean, with the Ravens, and I get it, the Ravens are playing at a different level right now, but Brock Purdy fell totally apart in that game, and I could see it happening again where they may not lose, but they keep that game close.
All right, and Jordan Love, of course, has been a great story because we weren't really all that thrilled with Jordan Love, thinking, geez, the Packers really need to dig up the body of Bart Starr if they're going to have any chance in the postseason. But he came on strongly at the end of the year and acquitted himself extremely well in the total decimation of the Dallas Cowboys, who decided, amidst rampant speculation, that they may be going in the so-called other direction. We've talked about that. Whenever in radio they used to say, well, you know what, we're going in another direction, and you keep thinking, I can go there. What's wrong with me?
You don't know what direction I'm going in.
How come the other direction never includes the guys that they're talking to? That's exactly the words that I received when we got canned from that 940 wins job, and then became, in historical perspective, the only guys ever to lose a starting job to Brady Quinn, who took over with his national show, which I'm sure is doing very well. Have you heard anybody, the buzz around town about the Brady Quinn show? I've never heard anybody mention it. Have you?
It's still on.
The wisdom of having national radio on local stations in major markets still doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense. Holy Phil Mushnick of the New York Post. What am I talking about here? All right, so we're going to move into the Sunday games, and you start out with Detroit against Tampa Bay, laying 6.5 with the Lions. Lions, another good story. They came on last year. Dan Campbell, of course, is everybody's. He's my hero, Dan Campbell. Running masochistic Oklahoma drills at a time where nobody touches each other. If you touch a guy in practice, you're kicked off the team.
Exactly.
As evidenced by the inept tackling that we're seeing all around the National Football League. And I guess, I don't know if it's appropriate to say the same thing is happening on the collegiate level, but essentially college football forever has been pro football, and now it may be more profitable to stay in college. There's a guy, a tight end that's coming to the University of Miami, and he is now going to enjoy his 9th year of eligibility.
He's been there. I don't know if he's been there for all 8 years, but he's been there for at least a year or two. And I saw someone defending him getting his 9th year.
9th year. Holy John Blutarski.
You understand he was in the same recruiting class as Jalen Hurts and I think Joey Bosa, not even Nick Bosa.
My dad was pissed because I had to take a couple of summer courses after I left Syracuse University in 4 years, and I needed 6 more credits. So ended up finishing up with a couple of easy classes that I attended at Hofstra, which was near my home. And then I got the sheepskin from Syracuse, and look where it's gotten me. Nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. So you have Detroit laying 6.5 against Tampa Bay. I am not a believer in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Not a believer whatsoever. And the Detroit Lions, even though they kind of staggered home against the Los Angeles Rams, at least the Rams were a hot team. Does one game represent a complete turnaround for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? Or was that more testament and a tribute to the idea that the Philadelphia Eagles had fallen so far apart, had been so discombobulated in losing 5 of 6 down the stretch, that it really isn't representative or indicative that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are a team to be reckoned with? I'm going to go with the Detroit Lions in that game. You're always reluctant to lay points, especially in these spots. I think they easily cover the 6.5 in this one because I just don't see Tampa Bay putting up that much of a fight. They're not going to be able to annihilate the Detroit Lions offensively like they did against the Philadelphia Eagles, and I'm pretty confident that the Detroit Lions will play a representative and good ball game in this one. 6.5, not too much to lay in this spot. Detroit Lions at home. The whole city is electrified by the idea that their team is finally going to make it. There are people that have been living 100 years that never saw the Detroit Lions do anything of significance. And this is their chance. I don't know that they win the Super Bowl. I'm not sure I'm willing to back them to do that. But I think they get by the divisional round, and I think they cover this spread comfortably. And so I'm willing to lay the 6.5 with the Detroit Lions. Other ball game, the Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. Much more difficult to assess. Hard to ever discount the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. And yet right now, Josh Allen is the hottest commodity in terms of the conversation, so to speak, about who the good quarterbacks are in the National Football League. Very error prone, though. I mean, it's difficult to overlook the idea that this guy was handing out picks like bar mitzvah invitations throughout much of the season, especially the early going when the Bills got off to a 6-6 start through their first 12 games. Now, they've won 6 in a row, including a playoff game last week. They did allow the Pittsburgh Steelers to get back into that ball game. They did cover the 10-point spread eventually. This game also is giving indications that people don't want to discount the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs have to go on the road. Patrick Mahomes has a phenomenal playoff record, as you might imagine, most of which was accomplished at Arrowhead Stadium. Is it still called Arrowhead, or is that offensive to Native Americans?
I mean, I don't know. I think they're like FSU, where they have a tie with the tribe that they're with. So it's homage as opposed to Redskin being a slur. So I think Arrowhead, which again is just an artifact. So I don't.
All right. Regardless, I mean, they now have to go to Buffalo, where the East Coast is being slammed with wicked snowstorms. Saw some shots of the city of Buffalo, unrelated to the ball game, just related to the horrendous weather that's hitting and slamming. I don't know if you can call this the Eastern Seaboard, because Buffalo, New York is far away from the coast there. The only water you're going to see there is a frozen lake. But the Buffalo Bills in this spot certainly accustomed to these kind of conditions. So we talked about the Kansas City Chiefs. They played in conditions that were so horrific. 15 people carted out of the stadium, 7 of which were afflicted with frostbite. And you were implying yesterday that some of the players even might have been victimized by that.
There were players that actually were suffering from some ill effects because it was negative 27.
Hypothermia. Yeah, and they're out there in T-shirts like clowns, like they were refugees from the Cleveland Browns dog pound. Exactly. Unbelievable. They always have one nutbag that's out there going, hey, he's got something written on his shirt, maybe 6 guys together spelling out Chiefs. Forget about that. Is it 6 guys? CHIEF. Hey, not a bad guess there off the top of my head, especially early in the morning here. The Sharpies, I guess, are sending it in also on the Kansas City Chiefs. That line was 3. It's now 2.5. And that makes it even more favorable for me to go Mr. Chalk on this one. I think the Buffalo Bills win in this spot. I don't think Mahomes has been nearly as sharp as he's been in years past. Travis Kelce, all of a sudden, he's become the second coming of Richard Castor. I don't know if you remember that guy from the New York Jets. Tall tight end who looked like he should have been a wide receiver. He was very fast. He would run right down the middle, and the pass would hit him in the hands, and it was hands of stone. Manos de Piedra. Ball would be dropped on the ground routinely. We had a guy here with the Miami Dolphins, Farrell Edmonds. Big, tough, strong tight end, but he couldn't catch a cold. Yeah. So Travis Kelce, even though he made a couple of good catches in the game last week, also has been victimized and prone and inclined to just horrendous, untimely. Is there ever a timely drop? I don't think so. But I don't know if, we can attribute this all to Taylor Swift and the idea that women weaken legs.
No.
But he hasn't been the same guy.
No.
Travis Kelce. I mean, if Jason Kelce was prone to retiring, which he did, I'm not sure that Travis Kelce needs to give it up. But he's showing signs, my friend. Showing signs that Father Time is the guy that's got his arms wrapped around him and ready to take him to the ground with that fabled last tackle. So I'm going to go ahead. I don't know about you, Lubie. How do you feel about this ball game? I'm going to go ahead and lay the 2.5 and hope that it even goes lower before I place my wager. But I think it's going to stay right around that number, 2.5, 3. If I can get it at 2.5, I'm very happy because I think the Bills in this spot at home. Think about it. Usually you accord a team 3 points for the home field advantage. I think this is a distinct home field advantage with Mahomes having to go on the road. He's been in the cozy confines of his home stadium throughout most of his playoff career. And I think the Bills finally break through here. Holy Scott Norwood, what are we talking about? And win this game by at least a field goal. So there you have it. I mean, chalk and chalk, Lubie. Is that disgusting? I mean, should I just retire at this point? When your inclination is to totally go with favorites, you know there's something wrong. Do you not?
Yeah. So in the Lions game, I actually agree with you. The fact that they are at home, the fact that they play in a dome, which one of their reporters didn't know, they played in a dome for decades. That offense will be able to do whatever it wants. I think the Bucs defense has played pretty well, but this isn't the Bucs defense of a few years ago that made Patrick Mahomes and a horrible offensive line look silly in the Super Bowl. I think the Lions will win. I think they'll win easy. And I think, like I said yesterday, I think the Texans and the Bucs are the two Cinderella stories of teams that got perfect matchups in the first round and it worked in their favor in home games with good weather when everyone else was playing in crappy weather. The Texans in a dome. That I think the Lions will put the Bucs to bed. I disagree with you with the Bills Chiefs because of the quarterbacks and the head coaches. As much as Patrick Mahomes screws around, yes, he's had a game here or there with the turnovers. Josh Allen led the league in turnovers. And we saw it with a Dolphins team that didn't have their pass rush get to him enough where he threw it away. The Chiefs, the one thing they have is a pass rush. And the one thing they have is Spagnuolo, who likes to blitz. And that's one thing where Josh Allen, if he's not able to get away and run, we see him make some mistakes. Whereas the Dolphins, the Steelers couldn't take advantage of him. Well, he didn't really turn it over.
He was pretty clean. I mean, they always use that cliche. Well, we got to clean a few things up. That was about as strong a game as he played. They still struggled.
That Dolphins
at
game,
times.
He turned it over a lot. And the Dolphins, the reason that they didn't win was they couldn't capitalize. The Chiefs, I think, can capitalize. So, and again, the fat man theory for us, unlike our friend Brandon Lang, we go with the fat man. The fat man in this matchup is Andy Reid. Literally, that's his nickname by our standards. So I lean Andy Reid. I lean Mahomes over McDermott and Allen. And I think the Chiefs, who are 2-0 versus the Bills in the playoffs, make that 3-0.
I hope the wind blows that play chart out of his hands and we actually do see the menu from a Chinese restaurant. Did they have Chinese food in Buffalo, New York, or did they only eat chicken wings?
Yes, I'm sure they
I think that's it. A couple of footnotes on this whole perspective that we're giving you. So you're saying go ahead, take the Kansas City Chiefs and the points in this ball game against the Buffalo Bills. You are inclined to agree with me about the Detroit Lions. I don't know if that's just because I'm rooting for the Lions and Dan Campbell in that spot, or they have played some really solid football. Jared Goff is a good story. Resurrected from the grave after the change of scenery. This was a guy that was throwing 2 hoppers to short when he first came on the scene there as the number 1 overall pick with the Los Angeles Rams. Then he had a couple of good seasons. They finally decided to move on, that they weren't going to be championship caliber with Jared Goff at quarterback. He appeared to be in decline at that time. He ends up with the Detroit Lions, and credit to Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator, and whoever is their quarterback's coach. I guess you have 6 different guys that are involved here, including Dan Campbell. But wow, I mean, he has turned himself into a solid, reliable pro quarterback, capable of doing some spectacular things. These two teams met before, the Detroit Lions and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and the Lions prevailed in Tampa 20-6. That was early in the season. I'm unimpressed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I think that was a fluke result last week, based on the idea that the Philadelphia Eagles are so decrepit, so depleted, so bad, so banged up, that they looked overwhelmingly impressive with a team that isn't all that good. So I think they go down, and I'm going to take a shot with the Buffalo Bills in this one. A footnote, you always have to learn to read the signs from the gods of gambling, and I'm not sure exactly what this means, but it did trigger a series of negative events in my life when my wife, the Mustang Sally, comes downstairs a couple of weeks ago and says, there's a dead bird on one of our balconies. A dead bird, Lubie. Now, you know that years ago I could have saved myself a lot of money if I knew how to read the signs from the gods of gambling. I told the story many times about the first time I went to the harness races, first time I ever went to a racetrack, which probably should have packed it in right there, where we ended up with a winning night. But the signs were firmly in place from the gods of gambling, as my friend Cliff Keller had borrowed his mother's car, relatively new. It might have even been brand new, probably had under a couple of thousand miles on it, Chevrolet Impala, which was a hot car at the time. In fact, you would love to own one now, especially this one. It was white with a red leather interior, Lubie.
Oh, nice.
Probably cost Cliff's parents about $2,000 at the time. That's what cars were going for. We borrowed the car where he had just gotten his license. His mother says, "Oh, okay, you can take the car." And sure enough, I had brought another friend of mine who was leaning towards degeneracy at a time where we were all clean-cut, straight-laced jocks. And this guy was smoking a cigarette in the back seat of the car on the way there, which was highly offensive to us, but we didn't want to tell him to stop. And I guess somehow with the window opened, an ash must have blown back into the car. We come back out to the parking lot after hitting the last race and winning, I think, $45, which was monumental at that time. This is circa about 1968, I want to say. And we come outside. We're the last guys to leave the track. We were celebrating and going crazy. And there's one car in the parking lot, and it's on fire. And guess whose car it was? And if I had just known how to read the signs from the gods of gambling, I would have never gambled again.
Exactly.
Now, what does this dead bird mean on the balcony? Does it mean that the Ravens are toast, that everybody's going to get sucked into that? Not exactly sure. As after that, I got diagnosed with a weird health issue. My wife lost her wallet while she was working, and it cost her a lot of money and a lot of grief. And so the dead bird kind of sparked and ignited a series of negative incidents in our life. But maybe it was a deeper sign from the gods of gambling. That dangling bird there. Is there only one team with a bird association? I guess it would be the Ravens. So be careful in that game. In case that dead bird meant something. Dead birds and cars on fire, Lubie. That's the way we're going to close this one out. Good luck with all of your wagers over the weekend. Should be very enjoyable. A lot of good stuff going on around the sporting landscape, and we'll be back on Monday to talk about all of it. And we're not afraid to go ahead and admit when we are wrong. So that's something we are accountable for. So if we buried you, I went with a lot of chalk. The only game that I probably would take the points in would be the Packers game against San Francisco. So San Francisco will probably blow out the Packers. The Ravens will go down because of the dead bird. The Detroit Lions will turn out to be fraudulent and choke a game away against the Tampa Bay team that would have no business being in the conference championship. Hell, what were they, 9-8 on the season? Barely scraped by the Carolina Panthers in the last game of the regular season so they could win the division. And then because of the bogus setup, and the fact that they don't seed teams by record, but by divisions and division titles, they end up with a home game against a Philadelphia team that was a total fraud, Lubie. See, I'm talking everybody right out of all of our picks. And then, of course, the Buffalo Bills-Kansas City game figures to be the marquee game on the playoff schedule. Looms as the tightest of ball games and the toughest call. I'm going to give you the Buffalo Bills. Lubie's going to give you the Kansas City Chiefs. So all our bases are covered. One of us is going to be right about that one. With that, as we said, have a great weekend, everybody. From Mike Lubie Lubitz, I'm Jeff DeForest. Thanks for tuning in on Caffeine TV and, of course, NoFilter.net, where the program is transmitted from. And very happy to be associated with all of those people and to have you guys tuning in every day to the next edition of the Morning Briefing.